They mocked a black elderly man until 5 words stopped the entire SWAT team cold. A forgotten war hero, a city under siege, a single chance to stop bloodshed, not through weapons, but through memory. This isn't a story about war. It's about what we do to those who fight for us after the fighting ends. Before we start the story, write in the comments from which part of the world you're watching today. They thought he was nobody. At exactly 10:17 in the morning, the financial district of Lockridge was locked down. Sirens screamed through glass towers. A high-rise administrative building, 77 floors of steel and light, had been taken. 10 civilians inside. One man with a rifle. No demands. Police vans lined the streets. Barricades rose, snipers positioned. Everything moved fast, except for one figure. He stood just outside the yellow line. Dark wool coat, cheap shoes, face like folded paper, half shadowed by a veteran's cap that had faded from black to a stubborn gray. He watched, unmoving, while the police barked orders, set up cameras, pointed lasers. The moment came when one officer aimed at the second-floor window. The glass didn't even shudder. The bullet, high caliber, sparked and flattened. The officer cursed. The old man stepped forward. "You won't break it that way," he said, voice steady. The officer turned. He was young, clean-cut, body taut like someone still trying to prove things. He laughed. "Oh, yeah. And who the hell are you?" "That window is ballistic laminate. Multiple layers. It'll flex and rebound. You need to—" "Listen, Grandpa, go have some oatmeal. This is a police matter." Laughter. 2 others joined in. Then one of them stepped forward, hand on chest. "Let's keep you safe, all right?" And with practiced politeness and visible force, he was pushed back across the barricade. He didn't protest. He only looked at the building, calculating, watching, waiting. No one knew his name. Yet, they thought he was nobody, until he said 2 words. It happened just before noon. Command was in chaos. Reports were scrambled, signals crossed. The chief was pacing behind a mobile operations van, red in the face. Inside, tactical officers adjusted gear. A team leader, Lieutenant Morris, briefed his squad with aggressive certainty. The old man returned, quiet, calm. He stood near the perimeter again, one hand tucked behind his back. "This plan will fail," he said to no one in particular. "Sir," came a warning from a female officer nearby. "You really need to stay back. There's no sensor sweep, no mapping of motion zones. You're going in deaf, blind, and uncoordinated. If you enter, someone will die." Morris snorted and stepped closer. "You giving orders now, old man?" "No," he said, "but I recognize the pattern. It's almost exactly what we tried in Moran Ridge. 1986. Morris narrowed his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" The man looked him straight in the face. "Commander Robert Wilson, Delta Unit, Operation Tempest, 1983 through 2001. Silence. Morris blinked. A pause spread through the mobile van like fire in dry grass. Someone stepped out from inside. A tech specialist. Pale. Nervous. He held a tablet in one hand, his eyes wide. "Wait. Commander Robert Wilson? As in, the real Tempest Wilson? The one from Dakar? From the breach?" Robert gave a small nod. Another silence. This one different. And then, the noise began. Within minutes, 3 calls went up the chain. A search through military records confirmed it. Robert Wilson had led black-level joint operations for nearly 20 years. Confirmed rescues. Confirmed captures. Confirmed zero-failure record on domestic negotiations. And then, a photo surfaced. A younger man in tactical gear, same eyes, same shape of jaw, holding a wounded soldier on his back with fire behind him. That soldier? Michael Xavier. The man currently holding 10 hostages in the Lockridge building. Back inside the mobile van, no one laughed anymore. Morris looked away. Robert didn't bask in it. He didn't gloat. He leaned over the digital map of the building and pointed with a blunt finger. "He'll be on this floor. Back left office. He's scared. But if he's sweating, that's danger. If he's crying, it's over. You'll need to know which one he is before you go in." But why now? One officer asked. Why would he do this? Robert closed his eyes, his voice dropped. Because you trained him to kill. You gave him the medal. Then you gave him the discharge papers. And nothing after. He straightened. And now you call him a terrorist. It was nearly 1,300 hours when Robert made his request. Give me 15 minutes, he said. I go in. No weapons. Just a vest and a radio. Let me talk to him. Morris looked uncertain. Others murmured. What makes you think you can reason with him? Someone asked. I can't, said Robert. But I know what broke him. That means I know where to begin. A pause. Then the chief gave a single nod. Robert put on the vest. He took the radio, clipped it inside. No gun, no helmet. Just an old man walking toward a building filled with heat and danger, and the ghosts of decisions made long ago. Before he stepped through the door, someone asked him, You sure about this? Robert paused. I don't do this. They die. I do this. Maybe they don't. That's the job. And then he stepped into the building, alone. The silence inside was worse than expected. Not the emptiness kind, the waiting kind. The kind that settles behind walls and doors thick with tension. Robert moved carefully, slowly, letting memory guide each step. 3 steps in, concrete tiles, no traps. 4 more, past the broken security desk. Nothing yet. And then he saw the first sign of life. A woman, early 40s, tears streaked down her cheek, sat on the floor of the lobby, back against the wall. Her hands were tied but loosely, not bruised. Her eyes found Robert's. She didn't scream. He raised one finger to his lips, then pointed to the left, miming quiet. She gave a tiny nod. This wasn't random violence. Not yet. He moved on. On the second floor, lights flickered. One was broken completely, buzzing. Robert kept to the left wall. In his mind, he traced the original layout. He'd studied the schematics minutes before entering. If Michael was following instinct, he'd pick the northeast corner. 1 entrance, 1 exit, limited visibility from the outside. It took him 6 minutes to reach the door. He didn't knock. He spoke. Echo 5. Tempest actual. Silence. Then metal shifting. Robert kept his hands visible, his stance loose. He waited. The door opened. Only slightly. Through the gap, a figure. Larger than memory, beard overgrown, eyes red. Michael. And the rifle in his hands trembled. Get back, Michael rasped. Get out. I won't stop you from pulling that trigger, Robert said quietly. But the moment you do, the world you're fighting against wins. Michael stared, breathing hard, fingers twitching. You don't understand. I do, Robert interrupted. That's why I'm here, and why no one else is. The door opened wider. Inside, the scene was controlled, but unstable. 8 hostages, hands bound, seated against the far wall. No signs of beating or abuse. They were scared, but alive. The windows had been covered with office curtains, stapled shut. Michael had pushed furniture against the door, chairs, a desk flipped on its side. And now Robert stood in the middle of it all, unarmed. Michael lowered the rifle an inch, just an inch. Enough. You shouldn't have come, he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. Robert didn't move closer. Instead, he asked gently, Do you remember Operation Galatea? Michael flinched. Stop! We were cornered, 3 down. You heard the comms. I was hit. Everyone was retreating. Stop! But you didn't. Michael closed his eyes. The rifle shook again. You carried me on your back, through mortar fire, through flames. The silence tightened. Robert stepped forward, one slow pace. That man, the one who did that, is not a monster. He's in pain, but he's not gone. Michael's voice broke. They forgot me. After I bled for them, after I gave them 20 years. You think I wanted this? You think I meant to? I just wanted... He trailed off. The rifle dropped, only slightly, now hanging loose in his grip. Robert said nothing. He let the words hang. After a few seconds, Michael spoke again, this time barely above a whisper. They called me a threat. Robert met his eyes. They called me the same thing today. The moment cracked open like a dry branch. Michael began to shake. They sent letters, bills. They sent no doctor, no therapist, no one. You think anyone answered my calls? No, said Robert. They didn't answer mine either. Not after I left. Michael's knees gave out and he slid to the floor. Robert didn't move toward him yet. He watched the hostages. They weren't struggling. They were watching, yes, afraid. But something had shifted. The man who had terrified them was now breaking in front of them. I didn't want to hurt anyone, Michael said again. I just wanted someone to listen. I wanted someone to remember who I was. I do, Robert said. Then he did something dangerous. He walked forward, slowly, and knelt in front of Michael. They were face to face now. No weapons, no commands, just two men, the past between them like a live wire. Robert reached up and gently took the rifle from Michael's hands. Michael didn't resist. The room froze. Robert stood. Everyone stay down, he said calmly into the radio. Weapon is secure. Suspect is disarmed. Repeat, no casualties. Do not breach. Then he looked down at Michael. You were never the enemy. Outside chaos. The feed from Robert's body cam had cut out 30 seconds earlier. Command was ready to move. Morris was halfway to the breach call when the radio came back alive, and with it, Robert's voice. They didn't believe it at first. But then the hostages began to exit, one by one, hands raised, faces pale but uninjured. Then came Michael, in cuffs, eyes blank, quiet, and finally Robert. No medals, no parade, but people started clapping anyway. They put him in the back of the van like a criminal. Michael didn't speak, not to the officers, not to the paramedics. He didn't look at the cameras flashing outside the police cordon. He just sat still, wrists in zip ties, staring forward, mouth closed, eyes sunken. Robert stood a few meters away, arms crossed. He didn't try to interfere. He knew the process. But when the door slammed shut and the sirens began, he turned to Morris. I'm going with him. Morris blinked. That's not procedure. He's not a suspect, Robert said with quiet steel. He's a patient. You've got no trained trauma specialists on that team. You take him in without context, he shuts down. Or worse, explodes. Morris hesitated, looked around. I'll take responsibility, Robert added. Every word, every second. On record. Morris gave a nod, barely, and Robert stepped into the second van. The door closed behind him. The ride was wordless at first. Then Robert spoke. You remember Reyes? Michael didn't look up. He was 17, Robert continued. His first op. You pulled him out of that building in Yarra Ridge. Third floor collapsed under you. You kept moving. Nothing. He called me last year. Said he still sees your face when he can't sleep. Michael exhaled, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. He was just a kid. So were you. Silence again. Then soft. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I know. I just woke up one day and realized I was still waiting for the war to end. Robert turned toward him. It never ends. That's the part they don't print in the manuals. At the precinct, they tried to lead Michael to a holding cell. Robert blocked the hallway. He talks to no one until there's a licensed VA trauma specialist present. A young officer, clipboard in hand, looked irritated. He took hostages. He asked to be heard. He brought no demands, fired no shots, hurt no one. You want to press charges? Then put every forgotten vet who's cried out for help on that list. The officer frowned. Robert added, I've got a list too. Want to see the medals? That silenced the room. Eventually, Michael was placed in a quiet room. A cot, water, dim lights. Robert stayed close, just outside. And finally, someone from the Veterans Administration arrived. Her name was Dr. Leon Morozova, late 30s, military psychologist. Sharp eyes, steady voice. She shook Robert's hand firmly. I know who you are, she said, and I know what you did today. I'm not done, he replied. She studied him for a moment. Do you understand the risk he still poses? I understand the pain he's in. That's not the same thing. Dr. Morozova nodded. Together, they entered the room. For over an hour, they spoke. Robert sat beside Michael. Dr. Morozova guided the questions. What was your last deployment? What happened in Buenos Aires? Did anyone follow up with you after your discharge? The answers came slowly, at first clipped, defensive. But with Robert sitting next to him, occasionally reminding him of old call signs, shared dirt, close escapes, the walls began to drop. Michael talked about the flashbacks, about the nightmares, about waking up and seeing himself, not in the mirror, but on the news as a threat. I used to dream about saving people, he said. Now I only dream I'm back there, stuck, and no one comes. You're not stuck anymore, Robert said. You walked out. That was your call. Not mine. Yours. Michael turned to him. His face was wet. And for the first time that day, he looked like a man who believed he was still alive. The press waited outside the precinct for a name, a statement, blood or scandal. What they got was different. A low-resolution body cam still leaked to the internet. It showed Robert kneeling, unarmed, taking the weapon from Michael's hands without force. Then the hostages emerging, led calmly out the door. The video went viral in under 6 hours. The first comments praised Robert as a hero. The second wave asked harder questions. Why didn't the police listen to him sooner? How many veterans live like this? Invisible until they break. What if no one had listened? A local paper ran a cover story. The man who saved 10 lives was first told to go eat his porridge. Robert read none of it. He had work to do. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. Michael was transferred to a psychiatric treatment center under veteran status. Charges were suspended pending evaluation. The police department issued a brief, neutral statement. No apology. But Robert wasn't looking for one. He met with Dr. Morozova again, this time with questions of his own. How many like him, he asked. How many calls have gone unanswered? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled a folder from her bag. It contained names. Dozens. Some were flagged voluntary hold. Others unresponsive, isolated, untreated. Robert looked down and quietly, firmly said, Then I want to build something, not a hospital, not a hotline. Something tactical, practical, training, prevention. A place where officers, medics, even civilians can learn to see these men before they vanish. She raised an eyebrow. You have a name for it? He looked out the window. The same name as the op they forgot. A pause. Then, Project Tempest. It started with the footage. By dawn the next day, over 2 million people had watched it. The shaky body cam clip showed a man in a dark coat walking slowly through a lobby, unarmed. Then a close-up of a trembling figure lowering a rifle. And then, the impossible, one taking the weapon from the other, like handing over a heavy truth. The comments came fast. He didn't disarm him, he reached him. They shoved this man aside. He saved everyone. Where's the apology? That last question was the one that wouldn't go away. Inside Lockridge City Hall, the press swarmed. A scheduled briefing turned into an interrogation. Was the hostage taker known to law enforcement? Why was Commander Wilson ignored at the scene? Who authorized a breach plan with no viable intel? The police chief, a thick-set man with a voice used to commands, stuck to short phrases. The situation was complex. We're reviewing procedures. Mr. Wilson acted with bravery. We respect that. But it wasn't enough. That evening, a second video surfaced. Someone, an officer, maybe a bystander, had recorded the exact moment Robert first spoke at the scene. You won't break it that way, he'd said, followed by the laugh. Go eat your porridge, Grandpa. The clip spread like wildfire. By morning, Chankrajgudi listened to him, trended across social platforms. Robert didn't respond publicly. He didn't give interviews. He turned down offers from national news outlets, podcasts, even military networks. Instead, he met with city council quietly, behind closed doors. Dr. Morozova was with him. So was a man in civilian clothes with a military spine. Colonel Eric Daniels, retired intelligence, one of the few who had once served under Wilson. Together they presented the framework. Project Tempest, a three-phase initiative: recognition, training for law enforcement in identifying signs of military trauma and dissociation; response, joint task simulations with crisis negotiators and veteran liaisons; reintegration, a bridge program to catch veterans lost in transition before they reach collapse. No slogans, no politics. Just a solution born from experience. City officials sat silently for much of the pitch. Then one of them asked, "Why you?" Robert's answer was direct. "Because if I hadn't been at that building yesterday, you'd be writing 10 eulogies today." The funding wasn't approved immediately, but the pressure mounted. Protests formed, not angry, not violent, but solemn. Veterans stood silently outside precincts. Former officers, medics, families. Each carried a photo, each with a name. Some had died in war. Some had died after it. Under each name, he called. No one answered. Meanwhile, inside the department, tension brewed. Lieutenant Morris sat in the break room, alone, watching a clip on his phone for the sixth time. The moment Robert had identified the window type, the casual dismissal, his own laugh, he turned the phone over. Silence. Then he got up and walked into his captain's office. "I want to speak with him," he said. The captain didn't ask who. She only nodded. The meeting was arranged without cameras. Morris arrived early in civilian clothes. Robert was already there, seated across a modest table, a folder open in front of him, filled with training protocols. There was a long pause before either man spoke. Then Morris cleared his throat. "I was wrong." Robert looked up. "I know. I profiled you. I saw an old man, a nobody, and I laughed." "I need to say that to your face." Robert closed the folder. "I didn't come here for apologies." "Then why are you here?" "To teach." Morris blinked. "To teach me?" "To teach anyone who walks into a scene thinking they already know who the smartest man in the room is." Later that week, Project Tempest held its first training session. A modest classroom, thin walls, old projector, but the front row was full. Detectives, paramedics, dispatch officers, even a few city officials. Morris sat at the front. Robert took the podium without ceremony. He didn't speak like a man trying to inspire. He spoke like a man who'd seen what happened when people waited too long to learn. There are patterns you can't see in a file. There are silences louder than shouting. There are ghosts that walk into buildings before the breach teams ever arrive. He paused. Then he turned to the board behind him, picked up a marker, and in large letters wrote, "Strength, volume, experience, appearance. Hero, legend." No one spoke. And for the first time in years, Robert felt something he hadn't felt since retirement. Not pride, not purpose, relevance. By the end of the week, 5 more cities requested the Tempest curriculum. Robert said yes to all of them, because this time, the mission wasn't extraction. It was prevention. And he had no intention of waiting for the next Michael to break before someone answered the call. The man who once walked into a hostage crisis with nothing but memory and courage now walked into a lecture hall. No sirens, no barricades, no weapons. Just a folder in one hand and time in the other. The room was fuller than expected. Word had spread. The name Robert Wilson had reached precincts, departments, and veteran support centers far outside Lockridge. What began as a quiet recovery program had become a network. Project Tempest wasn't a project anymore. It was a blueprint. A seat near the back creaked. A veteran shifting under the weight of too many memories. Closer to the front, a young officer, barely in his 20s, took notes with such urgency it looked like he feared forgetting a single sentence might cost a life. And in the first row, just as before, sat Lieutenant Morris. This time not with crossed arms and tight shoulders, but leaning forward, listening. Robert didn't start with credentials. He never did. He began with a question. Who in this room has made a mistake they hope no one remembers? No one raised a hand, but everyone knew their answer. Good, he said. Now you're ready to listen. He talked about signs, the tiny ones, the things paperwork misses, a twitch, a phrase, the language of broken sleep and half-healed fear. He showed video footage, anonymized. He played an old voice recording of Michael from a therapy session weeks earlier. I didn't want to be dangerous. I just wanted not to be invisible. Some students looked down. Others didn't blink. Robert kept his tone level. Violence is usually the last sentence in a much longer story. Your job is to notice the first words. At lunch, people lined up to shake his hand. Some asked for advice. Others just said thank you. One man, eyes red, didn't speak at all. He just nodded, then walked out. That was enough. By afternoon, Robert was back at the front, finishing his second session. He wrote 3 lines on the board again, like he always did. Strength, volume. Experience, appearance. Hero, legend. But this time he added a 4th. Silence, safety. Then he turned. I'm not the only one who has stories like mine. I'm just one who lived long enough to tell them. Make sure the next Robert Wilson doesn't have to wait until he's 72 to be heard. Applause came slowly, not out of excitement, out of understanding. Outside the lecture hall, the sky was low and gray. Rain had started. Light. Steady. Robert stepped out under it without a coat. Dr. Morozova walked beside him, silent for a time. Then she asked, "Do you ever regret not coming forward sooner?" Robert looked ahead. "No," he said, "because I wouldn't have been ready to say it the way they needed to hear it." She nodded. "And him? Michael?" Robert exhaled. "He's healing. Slowly. But he's not afraid to say his name now. That's the first real victory." She hesitated. "There's one more city asking for a session. 2, actually. Big ones. I told them we'd call back." Robert smiled slightly. "We will." That night, alone in his apartment, Robert sat at the kitchen table. The same folder open, same handwriting, curriculum updates, notes on common psychological misreads, ideas for future trainers. His phone buzzed, a text. From a number with no name, just a familiar sequence of digits. Echo 5. "You still teaching?" Robert typed back. "Tempest actual. Always. Some heroes fade. Others shout until they're heard. But a few, the rarest ones, walk into the fire quietly. Then build a road out of it so no one else has to burn."